Welcome back, Rabbi Dr. Eliezerbrodt. We are back for at least part 2 on Likut Seforim. This is part of our greater series, season 2 on Chaim Kanievsky, but we're focused now on Likut Seforim. So Rabbi Brot's going to follow up with the sheer episode he delivered previously on Likut Seforim. Some more information, some fine-tuning, and we're looking forward to this. We once again thank our generous sponsor who has sponsored all of season 2 on Chaim Kanievsky. He's anonymous, but the dedication is in memory of Moshe Chaim ben Yitzchak David. May his neshama have an aliyah. Rabbi Brot, what do you have for us today?
Hopefully some nice, interesting things. Well, let's see. Let's see about what the feedback will be. Okay, so last time, just to recap in three sentences, is I spoke about Likut Seforim. It's good to use them, not to use them. I showed that the Mishnah Berurah and Chaim Kanievsky and Likut they call themselves, amongst other things, a Likut Sefer, which is some form of a Likut Sefer. They're collecting a lot of information from all different places. And this is one I also mentioned that this is one of the functions of the great Sefer, Beis Yosef from Yosef Cairo. It's a collection of massive amounts of material that existed up till his time. Then I just traced a little bit that afterwards there were many different important Likut Seforim, but I just focused briefly about the Knesset Gdoila, much later on the Shari Tshuva and the Pischei Tshuva. These are important Likut Seforim. I also showed that the Chazon Ish and the Chibina Rav Lamashal, they looked at the Pischei Tshuva so important that that it wasn't just that he brought down something, the way he brought it down, the parts that he brought down are very important for halacha. Okay. B'kitzur, there's a crazy wealth of literature out there that's published and it has to be accessed. So the way to access it is through these type of Likut Seforim. Okay. At the end, I mentioned a little bit about if searching for stuff, searching for Makairis is Yagia, and we'll fine-tune these 2 points today a little bit and see some more information about it. Number one, I came across a while ago a tshuva of the Beyehudah where he's talking about something in Hilchos Nida, and then he talks about it seems the person told him something from a Shev Yaakov. So the Beyehudah says to him as follows: "Vani ein darki l'sum iyun b'tshuvas Achronim chachmei zmanenu v'lo afilu b'koidmim." I don't look at tshuvas of our contemporaries or even the daris before dar or shnei daris. V'day lanu b'hamek iyunoi b'divrei Talmud u'paiskim rishayim v'asoimchim lehem ad higi lebalei shulchan aruch asher sadr lanu shulchan malei berachas Hashem. So he did not look too often in the Teshuvot Seforim beforehand. This is what the Beyehudah says. Okay, Beyehudah is Beyehudah, one of the great giant of all time Gedolei Achronim. That's what he says. Okay, there's an interesting letter from the Netziv. At one point, he talks about Teshuvot Seforim, and he says that they're very useful. They help open up the Shari Ha'iyun for those that are looking to paskin. Because you see sometimes how to do something lamaisa. In a different incredible tshuva of the Netziv / letter, which has many different fundamental issues, which not for now, but just to mention some of them as it relates to this specific topic, he talks about the importance of tshuvas, and he says it's so. He holds that it's because first of all the Paisik is saying halacha l'maisa. This is what one's supposed to do, and then he brings a famous Gemara in Baba Basra that's quoted a lot of times in this type of conversations. So there is some type of thing that in the tshuva when the Paisik is saying to rely on that this is what you should do. There's some type of importance to that. We do know that certain Gedolim did not want, and that's what the Netziv is dealing with also, maybe certain Gedolim didn't want their tshuvas to get out afterwards, they didn't publish them themselves. That's a different conversation. Then the Netziv says another thing, there's a special siyata shmaya for hira when a paisik is asked a shaila and he gives an answer. Netziv is very into this yisaid. Others also say a similar type of yisaid. He says some other points. And then at the end, he rather throws in a fascinating piece of information. We find that there are certain gedolim that their tshuvas are lost. So he says some type of thing like this: they weren't zeicha that their Torah should be in halacha l'dairis. And he says, even by Nevi'im, we learn from the Gemara Megillah Yudalid, the harba Nevi'im lo yizachu shnemer menuvoiseim l'dairis. V'chein kama tanoim v'amaram shelo yizachu sheyinikva b'mishnah b'gemara mishmam. Okay. Anyway, it's an interesting nakuda which will actually play out possibly shortly. So the Netziv, but the point is, the Netziv is very into tshuvas. That there is a value in tshuvas. Okay. There's an interesting piece. It was first discovered in a manuscript by Rabbi Shua Munshine in a journal called Tzvunot that came out from Bnei Brak, Tzvunot Volume Gimel. This Adayim, this Chibur never came out. It's called Avni Zikaron. The manuscript still exists in Hebrew University. And in the introduction, he discovers that Rav Zundel Misalan, Talmud Muvik of Reb Chaim Volozhiner, was once visiting a fellow, and he said over to him that Reb Chaim Volozhiner, his rabbi, said, this is what Rav Zundel says in the name of Chaim Volozhiner, sort of a taino that no one got together l'kabitz deis hashutim l'achtem yachad im divrei hashulchan aruch, which will be very beneficial. And all we know is the nice kelim, like the Taz and the Shach. Whereas roiv hamayis of chikar din hu besifrei hashutim, and it will be kedai for someone to go ahead and do it. Obviously, this shmua was most likely. First of all, the Shmuel was before there was the Pischei Tshuva, and even the Shari Tshuva came out towards the end of Chaim Volozhiner's life. So that's probably what happened, because he had Reb Ephraim Zal Margos had a kesher with Reb Chaim Volozhiner. So I assume that that's what it's from. But anyway, this sefer where this manuscript is some type of collection of tshuvas on Shulchan Aruch Even Ezer. Okay, so you see, even Reb Chaim Volozhiner is pro not only the learning Tshuvas literature, of someone making some type of collection of this literature to make it accessible and available. Okay. L'maisa, Sephardi Gedolim, such as the Ben Ish Chai, has a famous Hagdama to Tshuvas of his Tshuvas Rav Palim, where he's against certain Gedolim that didn't look at Tshuvas. And Rabbi Avad Yosef has Arichos Kedarka B'Kodesh, the Hagdama of one of his Tshuvas Svarim about this, that Tainus on different Paiskim that they do not use the various Tshuvas Svarim. Okay, now an issue is, in general, to point out is like this: the issue of a Likut Sefer is sometimes the Likut Sefer is its own words, and sometimes it's just direct quotes. L'mashal, the Pischei Tshuva, where I said specifically the Chazon Ish and Shabina Rav are very into it, he knew how to take out specific quotes and bring them down. The problem a lot of times with Likut Sefarim is they misquote, and throughout the generations there were many Likut Sefarim that would be malaket. They'd say something b'shem Adam Gadol, and it turns out it could sometimes be exactly opposite. It could be very problematic. Just to mention, and this fear, ad hayoim, is partially a fear that people have, Rabbanim even have fears against various Likut Sefarim. L'mashal, not to take away from the value of such a sefer, but there's a best-selling work, ad hayoim, it just came out finally, the last volume on Mishnah Berurah. It's been in the works for 20-something years. And volume on Chelik Daled Mishnah Berurah just came out a few weeks ago, and this is a best-selling work. When it comes out, thousands of copies are sold worldwide. And basically, what this person did is it's a ton of information on the Seder of the Mishnah Berurah. He collects it from a lot of different Sfarim. It's a Likut Sefer on the Mishnah Berurah, one of the many different Sfarim already on the Mishnah Berurah. Okay. So some people complain, there's two complaints, which just to bring it out, not against specifically the Sefer, but this is a common problem that people have with Likut Sefarim, and that is as follows. You could have a great Paisik. Let's say Rav Moshe Feinstein says something is mutter. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says something is mutter. And these type of Likut Sefarim will bring on the footnote, but ayin in Hudson Plot Sefer that says it's Aser. Now, most people don't necessarily have at their fingertips who's this Hudson Plot Sefer. So now, let's say this Hudson Plot Sefer was really a gadol, Rabbi Akiva Eiger, unknown Rabbi Akiva Eiger of his generation way back. Okay, that's a different that's a shaila. But many times it could be is some young kaila guy who wrote a piece in some journal that it's great to have the information, but who said that that's going to change the psak? You have Rav Moshe, Rav Shlomo Zalman, whoever the big paiskim are against such a thing. So people get very nervous from it. But another greater problem, which has been shown with many Likut Sefarim, is the quoting. The quoting could be off. Just to mention one story about this is as follows: a fellow under a pen name, a friend of mine, his name is the pen name he uses is Akiva Shemesh. So he wrote an article over 10 years ago on the Sfarim blog, which was he demonstrated that 16 mechabrim today current people alive, all quoted something in Hilchas Bris Mila, and none of them saw the actual source inside. Each person was taking from the other. So when you say Likut Seforim exists, just you see how many Likut Seforim there are in Hilchas Mila. There's many more than 16, a lot of times they're relying on the one before, and this is a fear that people have. Why they're have some type of fear about Likut Seforim for centuries. This is not a problem today. This has been a problem discussed and pointed out by many different Gedolim, and even sometimes you'll find Chashav Likut Seforim of today. Well, I'll quote one shortly. He says in his introduction, a lot of times a Likut Sefer is a problem. So maybe you can say not to rely on my Likut Sefer. Yes, I made it my concern to check the sources. And as I said, even the Beis Yosef in Zakdama talks about great Rishonim that he calls them Likut Seforim, and he says sometimes they also make mistakes. So this is a issue and fear about Likut Seforim. Now, just to mention, for the uniqueness Shabbat, I quoted in earlier episodes a Chibur Meleches Cheresh, which deals with chalitza for a cheresh, how it works out. It was a fascinating sefer that came out many years ago. And this is his claim to fame, although he was a great gadol in his time, was that he was the uncle of the Ar Sameach, and he rather brings a bunch of things from his nephew, the Ar Sameach, in his sefer. Okay. Anyway, in this sefer, Meleches Cheresh, he says in his Sharblat a very strange lashon. He says, what is this? He took a topic that there wasn't so much information about it, and he gathered a crazy amount of information. So he says, Melacha ve'enei chachma. And he's sort of even poking fun of it himself. That is, he gathered. It's a lot of work to be malaka from tons of svarim and sources, but there's no chachma behind it. And then he says, so he's like playing down what he did. It's whatever, Interestingly enough, he gets tons of askamas from Chashav Gedolim. The great Reb Shimon Sefer, son of the Chassam Sefer, says Chas v'Shalom. He says it's a gewaldige Sache, and what you say that it's melacha ve'enei chachma ani yomer ki hi melacha gedolim melecha shamayim lag the Torah la'idir melechas uman mufla ve'chachmas amuka. Hein yiras Hashem hi chachma l'zak zerav zerav yiltel mo l'dar dars. But Kitzer, the Rav Shimon Sefer is picking on the shar already that there is more living. Now, obviously, there's something going on, and that's what I'm going to focus on in a moment. The chashivas of such a sefer, Meleches Cheresh, because as I said, this person was a great gaon, a great literature gaon at the time. Okay. Now, there was a fascinating yid. I'm not sure if I mentioned him in previous episodes. His name was Tzvi Michel Shapiro. He dies in 1906 in Yerushalayim, born in 1840. Okay. This is one of these unique Gedolim, superstar Gedolim in Yerushalayim. Anyway, this person, he was the Rebbe of Reb Yaakov Charlap, and it seems he was one of those special, today unknown Gedolim, but a very special Gadol. So after he was nifter, Rav Charlap wrote a book about him, a Gedolim book about him. You say, here's a case of a tremendous Adam Gadol, such as Rav Charlap, writing a Gadol book about his Rebbe. And it gets reprinted by Yisroel Debtilski, who is he found this chibur also fascinating, so he reprinted what Rav Charlap publishes. And now, just understand, it has askamas from the Ridbaz, Rabbi Yitzchak Blazer, Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, and Rav Kook. So there's a lot of fascinating things going on in the Sefer. A fascinating, unique, not your typical type of person. He's a tremendous Oved Hashem. He was very into fasting, Tanesim Sigufim, which was so interestingly enough in the Haskama, the various Mechanim say this is, even though yes, it's good to know that he was like that, but there's not something to do. He was on the darga to do such a thing. Anyway, so Charlap publishes a few different letters of this his Rebbe that he wrote to some people. Anyway, this Rebbe was tremendous. This Rev Shapiro was tremendous into learning. He learned the Yom V'Layla. But one of the things he did was, after he learned, he was fascinated to see whatever he could see on the sugya, whichever svarim he would be fascinated to look at. And he writes in a letter that there's so much information out there that after Moshe Rabbeinu got the Torah, there's no such thing as a yachid that could know Kol HaTorah Kula. So that's why it's kedai to see different things, because through chipos besvarim, you could sometimes find different gedolim that you would never, that they got a special siyata shmaya that you would not get. So he was writing this as a nakuda to a Talmud of his about a nakuda in learning dafka, to look for sources, to go out of your way, and to try to hear what other people have to say, because it's very important. Okay. Now, Reb Shlomo Debtilski, returning to him actually, so he was a tremendous gadol in Bnei Brak, who was nifter only a few years ago. He had arichas yamim, and one of the things is he was one of these people that had to do with all different worlds. What do I mean? He was a Litvak. He actually knew the Chazon Ish. He was close to the Chazon Ish, and he held himself a granik, so to speak. I mean, say he was Isaac to do many of the hanhagas of the gra. But on the other hand, he was very into Kabbalah, Litvish Kabbalah, but also into Sephardic Kabbalah. And he was in contact with all different Mukabbalim from all different worlds. And he wrote dozens of svarim. Close to 100 svarim were published in his lifetime. Some of them are small, all types. He was also a big Bal Musar, a very big tzaddik type of yid. And he wrote, one of the things is he's one of the people that like specialize in these like take a top Purim Shulish, and he'll write a whole massive sefer about it. And he was one of the first people that did like these unique type of topics, like even like a Sif and Shulchan Aruch, and he could write a whole sefer about it. Anyway, so he was very into Likut Sefer. So Yeshurin, the Kaivetz Yeshurin, volume 40 and even 41, was devoted to a lot of about him. And in there are fascinating quotes relating to this topic of Likut Sefer that he was very into, and he held that one should make use of Likut Sefer. So, and just to say Bekitzer, he in a different place, in a different article that was published, he talks about what's hanhagas for a rabbi. He thinks he wrote this 50 years ago or something. Some tips for a Rav. So one of the tips is, he said like this: Baruch Hashem, today we have Balei Asufos. On every single sugya you could find that there's a sefer miyuchid on that someone went ahead and was tayrich to collect all the information on the sugya. Now, basically a paisik, a Rav, or someone involved with Torah and these type of things. A lot of times there's so many new types of topics, you don't even know where to begin. So a Rav should make it his business to have these svarim yuchadim of these topics. Okay, this is a very interesting thing of his. But on the other hand, interestingly enough, he is concerned. So first of all, he also wrote a bunch of these types of svarim, and he's recommending Rabbanim that they should also make use of these type of svarim to get them. But on the other hand, interestingly enough, he's also concerned with that sometimes you have to be careful with the quotes. Okay, and that's a key point that will come up shortly, and that is as follows. Who are these Bali Malaktim? Means, let's say I find that Pliny went ahead and took a topic, and I'm not saying this sefer just because it's staring right in my face. I'm not saying it's the problem over here. There's a sefer called Erev Tafshilin Ha'aruch. Someone went and wrote 2 massive volumes on everything about Erev Tafshilin, which in Eretz Yisrael is not even so negea. But someone went and learned it, and he mamish learned all, from the sugya scratch and every sefer, and he was in contact with a bunch of the gedolim at the time. So now, but the problem could be is maybe the person who is learning this topic and writing about it doesn't really know. He could be an Amaretz in all other areas. Chas v'shalom, I'm not saying that about this Mechaber. But anyway, now, the point is like this. There was a thing called specialist svarim. Yisrael Tashma identifies, and the times of the Rishonim, we have certain svarim. One is a famous sefer, which will play out soon, called Baruch She'amar, which is one of the key works on Safros. We don't know anything else about this Mechaber except that he has he's one of the main sources for, let's say, for the Beis Yosef, for psakim on how to write ksivas oisius. So the point is sometimes these mumchim might only be a mumche for said topic of Safros. We don't know if they were anything else. There's also svarim lamashal of people they wrote all hilchas bris milah, but that's all they knew, or it's possible that's all they knew. So there's some type of fear that you have to be aware that just because Pliny wrote a sefer on this and this topic, who said he's a mandamer, so to speak, if he's going up against a big gadol. Now, interestingly enough, there's a Givaldik I came across once, a scum of the Aderes, to the incredible sefer on Bris Milah from Rebel Yepaisa called Kairis Habris. And over there he talks about he says, Matzanul Rabbeinu Shahayu and then the Aderes Kedarka brings a bunch of Marmakayim to this. That there's a musig, that there's so much to know out there. So what happens is that we find certain gedolim that they became, so to speak, the go-to person on said topic. And he's saying, for Mila, you should use this for Rebelli Paisik. Rebelli Paisik, Yadua, was a guy in Olam in many different areas. But that there is just throws out there such a concept that that a gadol, that there's such a thing as mumchim for specific sugis. There's a fascinating askama in the Sefer Erev Tafshilin Ha'aruch. So this I heard from Rabbi Lerner many years ago, like this. He says that Reb Shammai Gross writes that b'shem Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Talmud Chacham ha'oisik bebir halacha hu ha'poisik b'hach halacha she'oisik ba yoser me'agadol ki hu bir kol hashitos shel hasvaros. Basically, that there's such a musig, if someone takes a specific topic and spends mamish yomim v'layla on that topic, he could be the gadol hadar in said miktzaya. Now, even though Reb Shlomo Zalman says it, it obviously needs clarification, because you can't have a person that doesn't know Klali Hayra and never learned, that doesn't know how to learn, and just takes a random topic without any other background, and then he becomes the Gadol Hadar even in that topic. I don't think Reb Shlomo Zalman means that. Anyway, recently a beautiful sefer came out a few months ago called Netziv Seira, a massive, almost 1,000-page sefer on all different aspects, 70 chapters on Inyanim of Hayra. He has a whole thing about this Nakuda, to not with this Maramakim Reb Shlomo Zalman, but the Nakuda of a mumche for Hayra trying to be mesader this sugya. That is such a musig l'chol pachos. We have Adam Gadol, and then in certain topics he's the Adam Gadol. You'd say he's a tremendous Talmid Chacham, and then he's an expert more in. Okay. Anyway, interestingly enough, just to say 2-3 marmakaimis about this, and then we'll move on. Like this, a lot of times, and especially even today, one could will find that Torah is just endless. There are so many new topics. There's explosions of topics, especially in modern medicine, in knowing mitzios. Let's say electricity. It's a brand new topic. So, it's only 100-something years old. The shilas about it, and require, in order for someone to understand it, you mamish have to have a proper understanding of the sciences and the mitzios. And there's so many different topics today in halacha. As time goes on and new different inventions, it causes that one has to know incredible amounts of information. So at the same time, someone has to know all this information, understand it, and to be a paisik in it, to know the sugya from scratch and everything about it, it's very hard. There's too much to know. So interestingly enough, I came across years ago that Rabbi Yisroel Salanter seemed to already in his time was concerned that there was too much information to know. And we don't have gedolim such as his specific example was the Vilna Gaon and Reb Zalman Volozhiner or Reb Akiva Eiger. So there's too much to know. What could you do? So Reb Yisroel Salanter he was thinking of a program to come up with, and it sounds like the starting point was people that were chashuv, and then to create that these people should become experts in different miktzayas. So there should be an expert in whatever miktzaya there is. That's the address for this sugya. This is the address for this sugya. An incredible thing, and it's fascinating how it's written out. Rabbi Yitzchak Moltzen, a Talmud Muvak by Rabbi Yisroel Salanter, not only about Musar, a great paisik known as the Shvisas HaShabbos. If someone learns Shvi Shabbos Kalchasa, you'll see his quoted very often. He made Aliyah Seif Yamav, at that time with Rabbi Tzvi Frank. Anyway, so he was a Talmud by Rabbi Yisroel Salanter. He put out a bunch of different chiburim. In this chibur called Seder L'Mishnah, he brings this whole different thing, it's a few pages from Rabbi Yisroel Salanter that he was trying to do such a thing, to create such a thing. And it's just incredible to see all the different quotes and the different nakudas in this aspect. But the point was that it sounds like to be a gadol, and yet in all areas of Torah, it's too much already. It's mamish too much. And interestingly enough, he was saying, this is Rabbi Yisroel Salanter talking. Rabbi Yisroel Salanter was considered one of the great giants in his generation, not just what people think today of him as a Bal Musar. He was an unbelievable guy in Olam. And he was worried and concerned about this. So the point was he was trying to come up with an oifen how to fix it. Interestingly enough, another person that was trying to fix such a thing was Rav Kook. In the 1880s, he tried to create a journal, Iytur Sofrim. It didn't take off. His wife died, so only 2 issues came out. But in one of the nakudis that he was trying to do also was to create a forum for Gedolim to be able to write in, because there's too much to know. So different Gedolim will write up as a shaila, and you'll be able to hear feedback from different Gedolim, what they think about said issue. because me say mamish like a live base medrash with gedolim that have tremendous yedias and all different things, fighting it out or discussing it out. Pilpul chaver mamish adasayf. Okay, now and interestingly enough, a little later, in Asifas in Vilna, that not in Vilna, but in Asifas in Europe, we find that this came up also. There was such a musig. Okay, now, just to conclude this with two other nakudas, we find interesting there's a Mesorah brought down by the Tzedel Derech. This is in the times of the Rishonim, that the Balei Hatosfos, how is Tosfos written? It's interesting, Mesorah. Sometimes over time, I come to believe that there's much truth to this, especially after what I just said. Basically, the story goes like this. This is the Mesorah that the Tzedel Derech brings. They're sitting in Beis Medrash, they're learning. So what was given Torah in those days was mostly Baal Peh. So each one of the various Balei Hatosfos were people that were experts in one Masechta. Say they knew how to learn. Trust me, ganz fine. Not like people today. They knew how to learn, but in one Masechta they were an expert, and they would handle each shaila, and they would say, "How does they go to him? Pliny, does this Yisai work out in Masechtas Brachas? Yes. Does it work out in Shabbos? No. Why not? He bring up the Gemara. Then the next Rishon would say, oh, there's a Gemara in Ksuvas, like that, it could be answered. Because when you look at Tosfos, you see all of a sudden Shas is being ping-ponged, which was by Rashi. Rashi stays off an art. But when you start learning Tosfos, all of a sudden Gemara's galore come up. So there's a Mesorah brought down by the Tzedel Derech. Like this, it's very interesting, because I'm saying Rabbi Yisroel Salanter held that this is a necessary thing. There's so much to know. And you need mumchim in Mektsayas to paskin. Okay. Anyway, but the point is, the fear is that this mumcha has to be a tremendous Talmud Chacham, and I think also L'mashal, this relates to a machlokes. Chazon Ish was very into this. That the Chazon Ish held very strongly. It has to be a tremendous Talmud Chacham. Whereas Reb Shlomo Fisher they had a whole discussion, which was relating to a concept called Balei Agada. If there's such a thing as a Bal Agada, you say someone could be, he's an expert in Agada, but he's not an expert in Halacha. So with Chazon Ish held there's no such thing. You have to, in order to be a Bal Agada, you have to be a Bal Halacha. Shlomo Fisher held, I'm not going into the whole discussion about it. I actually once mentioned it in an episode about the Kuzari, but the point was there's such a thing. The Chazon Ish held you have to have a Kook of All Torah Kula also. It has to be a playing over here. So even this mumche, he could be a mumche, but he's a mumche that also has a tremendous yada on Torah. Okay, but this is obviously, I'm not trying to fine tune the thing. I'm just trying to point out various ideas about this. Okay, now fast forward, the Steipler, who we've said numerous times, who is one of the main influences on who Chaim Kanievsky, his son. They learned Shas together, and they had a lot to do with each other. What's his opinion about Likut Seforim? So interestingly enough, we have a few different quotes. One is someone, a Rav, it seems, had a shayla in shul. They didn't know about if a Sefer Torah was possible, so they're talking about it. So this is either the Steipler or the Chazon Ish. They said you have to make sure to have a Siddur Derech Chaim from the Netziv, which we have an episode which we still didn't release, about the Chashivas of the Sefer. He says every Rav in Lita, when he got a job, bought a Siddur Derech Chaim, and he never left the shul, because all the shilas that come up in the middle of shul, you need to have a go-to Sefer to paskin now. It could be afterwards. The Rav might decide to learn the sugya and might argue on the Nesivas, but the point is the Nesivas was the Nesivas, as I said, I talk about in this episode. He was the superstar Gadol Hadar in that time. So there are certain type of these Sforim are like that. Okay, so the Steipler says bring such a Mesorah, or it could be it's the Chazon Ish. It's very confusing, the Archas Rabbeinu, because he's a Talmud of both, and I forgot offhand. It's been a long time since I used the Sefer. What's what? Anyway, but the Steipler over here brings down one of the Sforim that he would keep for Pesach, because the Steipler, the Chazon Ish, which didn't use so many Sforim on Pesach, because he held you have to check if a chametz. Ki Yadua, the famous story with the Chazon Ish and the Shebina Rav Sefer, they said he cleaned it for Pesach, so the Shebina Rav said, no, he didn't clean it for Pesach. He knew he never used it the whole year, so he didn't have to worry about it for Pesach. But anyway, this is the Anava of Great Gedolim. But anyway, the story goes, so here, the Archas Rabbeinu says, one of the Sforim was Madani Shmuel. Why? Because the Sefer Madani Shmuel is a Likut of Hilchos Pesach from Teshuvot HaPoskim, and the Steipler said, if a Shaila comes up for him on Pesach, he needs to have a go-to Chashav Chibur that has a Likut of Sforim. Now, the Madani Shmuel, very few people are aware what it is. This is the same Mechaber, the Mincha Shabbos. Again, not so many people know what the Mincha Shabbos is, but if you use Shmir Shabbos Kachasi, you'll see it's quoted dozens of times per page. Incredible work, not for now. that springboarded off the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. So here we have that the Steipler was into this Likut Sefer. Another place we have is the Steipler in Orchos Rabbeinu. Another one last place is again about the Piskei Tshuva, which we spoke about last time. And he says, so here in the Orchos Rabbeinu, he brings that the Chaim Kanievsky, the same Messiah, the Chazon was very into the Piskei Tshuva. It's the Paisik Achron. He rather also brings similar to what we brought from a different source about the Chabiner and the Piskei Tshuva. Another Nikud they bring down is someone asked them which sefer to buy. They said the Birkei Yosef. It's a very chashuv sefer, and he says like this: the Steipler liked to look at different Likut Seforim, such as the Steichemet, the Arches Chaim from Spinka and Shulchan Aruch. He looked at it always, and the Gewaldige Sefer Pischei Olam, which we spoke about briefly, and some other Likut Seforim, Lamashal the Chaim Ubracha, which is an incredible Likut Sefer on Hilchos Esrog V'Lulav. Okay, so we see even the Steipler looked at Likut Seforim. Now, what's this all negaya I'm trying to bring up is like this. So Chaim Kanievsky, so as I said, Chaim Kanievsky writes this Derech Emunah. The Derech Emunah we mapped out based on his own list and checking his list is everything negaya to Zram and then somehow is stupped into these 4 massive volumes called Derech Emunah. Okay, but and Rishonim, and I said Ga'onim and Medrash Chazal and the new stuff and everything, and Meiri's page you could have on one page you could bring you the Meiri 8 times and all the Rishonim and everything galore he's bringing. Okay, but Kitzer, I'm learning Derech Emunah many years ago, and I'm learning Hilchos Pidyon Ben, which is found in Chelik Dalet, and I noticed that all of a sudden I see he's quoting a sefer Likutei Pinchas, a Likut Sefer from before the war on Pidyon Ben. Then all of a sudden I see another sefer, Pidyon Ben Kilchasai by Rabbi Oberlander of Muncie. I see he quoted once, twice, a bunch of times. What's going on here? And eventually I discover as follows, that Chaim Kanievsky already writes in the beginning of Derech Emunah Chelik Aleph that he's writing it on the Rambam's Ram. And it's a Zraim work. What can you do? Zraim also has some halacha l'maisa. L'mashal, in Hilchos Matnas Aniyim, there's halachas of tzedakah and meiser, all these types of inyanim. So what does Chaim Kanievsky write? These areas I didn't really learn as much. I brought the Divrei Achronim. It was Malaka from Achronim. I mean, say everything else, he checked the Rishonim and everything, whatever. Anyway, now Lamaisa, if you go learn the Derech Emunah over there, you'll see he's bringing ganz fine and new stuff of his own also, but he does use various Likut Seforim. So as I was going through Derech Emunah, I came across, and just to point out the list is as follows. On one hand, you'll find that he'll use the Piskei Tshuva. I said, yes, the Chazon, the Steipler, into Piskei Tshuva. So he brings a Noda Beyehudah without even checking up the Noda Beyehudah. On the other hand, I came across there's a Gavaldik Likut Sefer Tshuvas, a tremendous Baki. It's called Chavalim Benimim. Chaim Kanievsky brings it down, and then he says, "But this Likut Sefer wasn't matiked properly." So he relied on the Likut Sefer, but then he didn't rely on it, and he checked it up. The Madani Shmuel he brings down. Okay, so I started to look to see what real contemporary Likut Seforim does he bring down, and I discover as follows. L'mashal Hilchos Tzedakah. So he brings Havas Chesed, Aruch HaShulchan, Chachmas Adam, Piskei Tshuva, but those are mainstream halachas. He even brings a more contemporary person, Meiser Ksafim Ba'alacha, Hilchos Klayim and Shatnez. It's Nagei Bezman Hazeh. He brings his Chibur that's published very recently, Lamazir V'Lanizar. You get the Chelik Daled. So what I'm saying is that Chaim Kanievsky uses also Likut Seforim of different people. You get the Chelik Daled, it's more Beilet, the Darkei Tshuva, Kaf HaChaim, Piskei Tshuva. He quotes a lot. He quotes the Sefer Mafteach, which we already spoke about last time, and other times he was very into the Sefer Mafteach. It saves a lot of time. Let's say Hilchos Kala. So he quotes earlier Seforim, Migdash Mat, Chalas Lechem, but then he brings Rav Balei Sefer, Lekut Oimer. In the Parak on Reishis Hagez, he brings a contemporary guy in Bnei Brak, Gaz Tzeinecha, all the time. Pidyon Ben, we mentioned Petach Hamar. So Havat Shalom put out a massive work called Yaakov Petach Hamar. He brings a Kesed the whole time. Shmitas Ksafim, he brings the sefer called Shmitas Ksafim Kilchasa. The Kitzer, you see over here that Reb Chaim Kanievsky also did this Nakuda is that he went and he learned Tesugis from scratch. And as I said, scratch like there has never been before, checking all the Rishonim and everything. When it came to the after Shulchan Aruch, so sometimes, especially topics that are again more halacha l'maisa, he did rely on Pidyon Ben Kilchasa. What does he rely on from these svarim? So to be clear, not so much the hayra, the information of these svarim are very important for him, and that's what's going to play out shortly with the Chazon also. me say it like this: Chaim Kanievsky didn't have every achron under the sun. He didn't have his same bakiyas that he's legendary for in Chazal, Rishonim, is not for Achronim. He didn't know every Teshuvah Sefer. He didn't learn every Teshuvah Sefer. He didn't have every Teshuvah Sefer. He would rely on these type of Svarim. Oh, this Chashuv Gadol asked the question, and now Reb Chaim would try to answer it based on his information. So he would see that Tzemach Tzedek brought down in the Pidyon Ben Kilchase asked this in this Kasha, says Reb Chaim Kanievsky, Loit, the Ritva Rashba, Meiri, and Rikurkis, you could answer it. That's what he was using these Svarim similar to what I said about the Beis Yosef. The Beis Yosef became the library for Gedolim for Dairis. They didn't have these Svarim. They would just use this Svarim. So Reb Chaim Kanievsky for Achronim will rely on some different contemporary Svarim from the Darkei Tshuva on, Piskei Tshuva. Okay. It's an interesting point. Even that I'm just trying to bring it out. Take it or leave it. Okay, fine. Now, now we get to the end of this episode. There's just the last few minutes. I like to get to talking about the Chazon Ish as follows, and that is like this. We began last week at the end. We spoke about what's the story about if you have to look up, doing research. So over here you see Reb Chaim Kanievsky, Lamashal, all the Rishonim, he's galore. He's looking at every Chazal. He's making sure to have every Ga'onim. Okay, Achronim, he relies on various Chashuv Likut Seforim that he felt he could rely on for different things. So I brought a bunch of different quotes about if it's a chelik of Yegia. So one quote that I didn't bring at the time was that Reb Zalman Volozhiner in the Gewaldige Sefer called Toldos Adam, one night they found out that he walked very far. There was a certain sefer that he needed to see. It wasn't in Vilna, so he walked very far. It was freezing cold to get the sefer. Asked him why. He says, "What do you mean? Loi b'shamayim hi shteit in pasuk, but sh'im b'shamayim hi atatzarich la'ales achra v'chulu. So therefore, what's the big deal? I walked chutz la'ir to a different place. It's not that far. It's closer than Shamayim to go look up this sefer. So you see, the great Reb Zalman Volozhiner, he went to go. Now that doesn't necessarily mean I'm not coming to try to go the other way that, you should be spending hours and hours researching and tracking down different Svarim. But the point was, there is this Nakuda in Chipus Svarim. Okay, why am I keep on saying this Nakuda Chipus Svarim, looking up Svarim? And that is as follows. The Chazon Ish, as we've said in the past, was involved throughout his lifetime in various what's called Pulmusei Halacha. One famous one is the letter Tzadik, how one writes the letter Tzadik. This is a topic today in recent years. So much ink has been spilled, articles in various journals, very hot, sensitive topic, and I'm not attempting to talk about the actual topic. But just to understand what we're talking about is, how do you write a letter Tzadik? So one mahalach is, it has the letter Yud and the Nun together. The top part has the Yud, the next part is the Nun. So it's a Yud on top, a Nun together. What about another method? This is the method the Beis Yosef brings down. There's another way of writing it. We'll call it, just for lack of Hasidim, Kubalim are into, Yud, they have the Yud is backwards. Okay, so the question is where this comes from. And this is a pulmis in the times in Bnei Brak. There was a tremendous chashiva, Bal Musar de Yid, who was a tremendous Talmid Chacham. His name was Rabbi Aryeh Friedman, and he had a bunch of letters back and forth with the Chazon Ish, talking about tumbling in this sugya, where the Chazon Ish said his opinion about it, and he was trying to convince the Chazon Ish the other way. Okay. And as I said, there's booklets about it. There's the Sefer Tzidkas HaTzadik. This Rav Friedman published all the letters, the correspondence he had with the Chazon Ish about it, and all his material about it. But there's tons of articles, and there's more articles being written, and discoveries and different things, and then people get all hot about it, and then there's discoveries that possibly there's forgeries, and the tumults and tutzachlis with this type of topic we're not going to get into. But reading through the Chazon Ish's letters on this topic, we start to see something emerges about the Chazon Ish in general. The Chazon Ish says, L'mashal, Kasha lahamik b'kol halacha v'halacha, u'mitzvos ha'maisiyos ha'yomis ha'zmanis al-kein anu machmirin. Then he says, Ukmoikein en lanu halacha brura ba'anidon, u'b'fratch en kan makom iyun b'shas u'paiskim, u'lechein ani machmir. This topic, similar to other topics, is not always that there's a clear-cut Gemara and Paiskim. So I'm Machmir. That's what Chazon Ish says. Then he says in this discussion, what does he do? You rely on Svarim Muvhakim. I'm going to see who those Svarim Muvhakim are. You brought me rayas possibly not like this mahalach. Ani ragel bechipusim ubecheker kadmonius. Vani misnagid lederach zeh ki ena betucha. It's not clear what's going to come out. So now, what the Chazon Ish is saying, that I don't do chipus svarim. The Chazon Ish says this even more in these letters. As I said, these letters took place over a while back and forth. The guy tried to bring in different manuscripts to defend his size. He says the Chazon Ish, rak al sifrei hapaiskim shenimsru midar ledar b'loi hefsek. Then he says, Habaruch Shamar, and then the Beis Yosef hittik makars shall call ois voice. And so that's that. That's where we go. And then the Chazon Ish says some type of lashon about the galus the Baruch Shamar and the Beis Yosef. Okay, so he says all these types of lashonis. This person tried to bring him rayas from the people that on the other side, and what you find over here. The Chazon Ish says, what am I supposed to do? The Beis Yosef, the Baruch Shamar, they don't mention it. Okay, then the Chazon Ish says that Hashem Yisbarach gave hashkacha b'chol davar dar al yechidim shetolen b'chol davar dar lahayris chukav u'mishpatav liyisrael u'chashein ma'mikim b'alacha hein b'shazu k'malachim v'ruach mi'meroim shayra alein al piyeh nikva halacha b'ishus hachamura b'shabbos u'b'shar halachas chamuris. These are the people, they're the ones that caused the Mesorah in halacha. We go according to them. Okay, then in this conversation, the Chazon Ish says some type of quote. Halacha zu lo yantim neshen kan iyun shel sugi v'rishen v'chipus maisios b'sifrei hadoyris eini mumch lekach ve'eini soymech al zeh v'ani misnage lekfiyas halacha al yidei zeh. Another time he says, liyos chayker v'svarim b'divrei yeveshim eini mesugal lekach. So we see again and again the Chazon Ish is saying some type of lashon that's not what he felt to do. He does say that there might be that the people that this is their chelik and Torah, but it's not his. Then he says another lashon laharbis minin shel matir ein zamida to collect people that say it's mutter. Maybe there's even shitas that but they didn't come to us, similar to what I quoted earlier on with the Netziv. My chelik and Torah is not to do research. Okay, so these are the Chazon Ish, you see time and time again the Chazon Ish is saying some type of thing that he's not looking. Okay, he's not doing research, so to speak. Okay. The guy's bringing him these makayers. It's not enough. Okay, now the famous classical work on the Chazon Ish came out years ago called Paradar. So they bring down a quote about the Darkei Teshuvah. One time he sent someone to look up a Darkei Teshuvah for him. He wanted to see something with it, and the Darkei Teshuvah is a likut of Teshuvah Svar. Then another quote is fascinating quote I found is something they're talking about Rabbi Akiva Eiger. And he says that Rabbi Akiva Eiger is bringing down ki yadua tons of gedolim asvardim achronim, svarim that were very rare in that period of time. Ki yadua, Rabbi Akiva Eiger had a seder to learn exotic svarim daily, a half hour, an hour every day. We learned them, and that's how come we find if you go through Rabbi Akiva Eiger's Gilyonis and Shas and everywhere, a lot of times he brings svarim no one had. Says the Chazon Ish, Tamarani, Eich Matzah Rabbi Akiva Eiger Pnai L'Kol. How did he have time to look at all this? Okay. On the other hand, interestingly enough, I come across when Chazon Ish was nifter, so they asked Rav Herzog to write something about Chazon Ish. So in the conversation, he says he was once in his house. He says Chazon Ish knew Achronim, he had B'kiyas, but he pointed to his Sfarim. So Chazon Ish says, you don't have a lot of Sfarim. So Chazon Ish says, yeah, he says even what I have is too much. You say the Chazon Ish held there was some type of thing. Too much Svarim is not good. He wasn't interested in it. Now, fine. Now, what did the Chazon Ish rely on? So my claim is like this: the Chazon Ish held that we mentioned already a few times throughout the past 2 episodes, the Piskei Tshuva, Lamashal. The Chazon Ish is masking that there's meidah, there's important information in these tshuvas. But the Piskei Tshuva did the work already. I feel, and seeing the language, even in this pulmus of the Tzaddik, the Beis Yosef for the Chazon Ish was a massive library of information. It's in the Beis Yosef. Okay, I'll talk to you. Tons of Rishonim. The Chazon Ish learned Beis Yosef Keseder very well. He knew, he didn't just like learn the Gemara and had his epishtical Torah. An Chelik Archaim, there's no Piskei Tshuva. What was the sefer, the go-to sefer of the mass information for the Chazon Ish? My taina is the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah and Bir Halacha is a crazy amount of information. Again, he also collected from Rishonim and everything and Paiskim. Chazon Ish learned it crazy and we know this from his Agais. Right, the first sefer the Chazon Ish publishes quotes the Mishnah Berurah dozens of times. This sefer was his database, so to speak. Now, interestingly enough, this Rav Tiger that I've quoted a bunch of times, and he quotes Chazon Ish, he quotes a bunch of Achronim here and there. He just not Keseder. He was into his own thing. His Mahalach was, I have my Beis Yosef, I have my Piskei Tshuva, I have my Mishnah Berurah, so to speak. These are my data of collection of important material that's out there. That's enough for me. I'm not going to look too much for more. As opposed to, as I said, plenty of people, let's say the Mishnah Berurah, what did Mishnah Berurah do? The Beis Yosef wasn't enough for him. He went to track down all the new Rishonim. Chazon Ish was, he was somehow nervous from this. Now, what's going on? What's behind the nervousness of the Chazon Ish to decipher it? So just to mention, and it's like this. And these are the 2 points that we'll be messiahing with. Is like this. As I said, on one hand, the Beis Yosef is the library that has an ish. I'm going to tell you a fascinating thing. This is Siyata Shmaya. I can't believe when I made this list, that such a thing happened. So like I said, Beis Yosef has this massive library. Okay. There's even an article recently of Kisvei of how many times the Teshuvos HaRashba, no one had a Teshuvos HaRashba, but the Beis Yosef had tons of Teshuvos HaRashba. He made sure to put Teshuvos HaRashba wherever it's Negei important. Rashba, thousands of Teshuvos, put them, be mitzayin to them in all the right places in Shulchan Aruch. Lamashal is an article from Simcha Emanuel about it. And we kids are to try to decipher the library of the Beis Yosef. But it turns out, interestingly enough, various Sfarim the Beis Yosef did not have. In episodes 1 through 6, I spoke about many different Rishonim. I didn't know this at the time, but Lamashal, Rabbeinu Chananel, the Meiri, the Arzarua, the Sefer Yashar, the Shultas, the Bahag, the Teshuvos Harif, the Ramban and Milchamas, the Beis Yosef did not have. So it means to say like this. All these are mainstream people. The Beis Yosef doesn't have the Meiri. So Chafetz Chaim says, I have the Meiri. So now, the point is that the library, so to speak, gets updated. Of course, the Beis Yosef had a crazy library and people used it. Just like the Knesset Gdolah is updating it, there's an update is afterwards all these Rishonim are being published. So of course, there's certain times the Chazon Ish will say, yes, I could use it. And we showed throughout 3 episodes of the Chazon Ish, there were times the Chazon Ish said, yeah, a Razba, you could publish it, it's real. Certain times he was nervous. He didn't hold this Chipos Svarim Shabai. That he held, and it's not necessarily that he held that no one should do it. L'mashal, as I keep on asking, Chaim Kanievsky is doing it. His Talmud Muvak, his nephew, person, he did it for Rishonim. He had that koyach. The Chazon Ish held he didn't have that koyach to do it. That wasn't his chelik and Torah to go do the research to collect all the Rishonim and sit and process it. He held. He has the Gemara. He has the texts in front of him. That's enough. I came across a quote recently. The Chazon Ish said, Mesorah Shas, that's Vatzlanim. I'm not even sure what that means, because when the Rabbi Shai Berlin put out the Mesorah Shas, this made him a pecha. I quoted the Likut Seforim about this once. That people, to have a crazy B'kiyas on Shas, it was necessary to understand the Chazon Ish didn't need it. It's Vatzlanim, he said. Okay. Anyway, so the point is that what I'm saying is the library gets updated at a certain point in time. Chazon Ish held the Beis Yosef. What's Pshat? The Chazon Ish didn't care to update his library, and so this is a Messiah. There's a major Yesod that the Chazon Ish says in Hilchos Treifus. It comes up. There's a whole diun that what happens if there's certain treifus that today they lived past the zman of being a treifa. So does it change? So the Rishonim already deal with the Rajba and the Rambam, and this is a grace tumult. Chazon Ish comes up with some type of Torah, a Meirdik, a Mahalach. He starts saying it in one place. Later on, it becomes more sure of it that there's a zman that the Torah was given. There's different alafim of Torah, and so it doesn't make a difference if it changes at a certain point in time. But if in the zman when the Torah was given, this was a treifa, that's effects plays out for everything. So I saw someone sent this to me actually. Reb Nachum Zilber, a good friend of mine, sent me that Reb Nachum Rothstein brings down from his brother Reb David Tzvi Rothstein, who I believe I quoted once or twice before. The Chazon Ish spoke about Rishonim that he come from manuscript that with the Beis Yosef, that the Beis Yosef had this special Siyata Shmaya. He got what was necessary for him, and stuff that was Nelam, okay, that wasn't important. So you find all these information, and as I said, look at all the lists, and this was in the first few episodes of the season. I spoke about all these and tons of Gedalim. For the Chazon Ish, it's the Beis Yosef got a special Siyata Shmaya. This was what was Nizgal of him, and this was his Sifriyah. Yeah, he updated it. I said for Teshuvos, he relied on the Pesach Teshuvah, the Mishnah Berurah, he does rely on the Mishnah for Rishayim. As a matter of fact, the certain Miri I see, he brings it. How's the Chazon Ish bring it? The Mishnah Berurah, he knows about it. So there were times he's willing to update it, but he felt that's not his thing. But interestingly enough, even though he holds that Amstelling zu, this Rothstein that's saying it on the Beis Yosef, that this is how the Chazon Ish looks at the library and this is his go-to sefer, but he's willing to argue on the Chazon. The Chazon Ish says there are times we argue on the Shulchan Aruch. And there's at least a few different places, and Hilchos Tefillin I came across, and some other places. He says after v'afim devreim neged Shulchan Aruch matzina harba pamler b'sina Achronim anoitim halacha me'halachos hamavor b'Shulchan Aruch, where they have a special raya. He doesn't say anyone could do this. In one of the places, he says v'chein anu seimchem b'din ma'pratu shel Achronim zal af neged Shulchan Aruch goyna noida Beyehudah. He's a special person. Anyway, this all gets into another Nakuda, which we're not going to discuss now, which is the famous Tumim, which is also heavily discussed in the sugya of manuscripts. But the point that I'm trying to, this is what I'm concluding, is like this. And I'll wrap up all the points in 1 minute, like in this 1 minute. There's a Reb Chaim Kanievsky, the Mishnah Berurah. These are Likut Seforim. They're a type of Likut Seforim. They're not necessarily, there's different Likut Seforim that are, don't say the reason behind the halacha. You look at a luach of Rav Tukashinsky. What is it? It's a likut. It's the psak halacha, what to do in shul. There's no makairis, so people don't know where's the makar. There's obviously different levels of likuts from. There are likuts from that take a topic and they could put it into 900 pages, whatever the topic is. Someone was making fun about there's going to be a Likut Sefer about Asher Yatzar. A few weeks later, this was in a Sofrim store. I was there once. Literally a few weeks later, someone comes in with a Sefer on Asher Yatzar, and every topic has their Likut Seforim. As I mentioned, Debtilski holds it's very important to use them for the information, to process, to check. Not necessarily, you have to know if the person's Adam Gadol Ad Ma'id, you can rely on him, especially in cases where you don't have time to check. As I said, the story with the Netziv is the Derech HaChaim. Okay, now, but then, but out the information, not only is the Pesach Teshuvah important, but for Chaim Kanievsky, he used even Sfarim of more contemporary things. But part of this has to do with chipus, tracking down all different information. So for the Chazon Ish, this he held was not his job. He didn't want to do it. He relied on specific svarim, such as the Pesach Teshuvah, the Mishnah Berurah, the Beis Yosef, and it was more than that. He held if it wasn't for them, they didn't have it. That's it. He doesn't have to concern himself. Whereas, as I showed many different gedolim, the basic Mesorah, as far as I'm able to see, was we go with these new discoveries as long as we know that these new discoveries are reliable as best as we're able to in the topic. Okay, Ad Kan, this is the topic of Likutim Seforim. This also wraps up the sugya of the manuscripts. Avada, there's much more to say about Likutim Seforim. I could go down a rabbit hole for another 10 episodes. I have Rachmanis. We could talk more about the manuscripts in another 10 episodes, but we have to move on. Reb Chaim Kanievsky has many more things to discuss, and Mirz Hashem, a different time we'll get to it.
Wow. Thank you. So much information to comprehend. How long does it take you to put this all together?
I'm embarrassed to say, so I couldn't even say. I don't have exact cheshbon, but it's a lot.
Okay, so everybody out there greatly appreciates your work. Thank you very much for sharing. We appreciate the sponsor who sponsored anonymously in memory of Moshe Chaim ben Yitzchak David. Thank you. Anybody who has questions, comments, suggestions, dedication opportunities, please reach out to myself at shweidm@ou.org and or Rabbi Brot at eliezerbrodt@gmail.com. Would you like to pull out a sefer this year?
Yeah, we'll do very fast. A sefer, a new sefer on the market. It's called Aldas Rabbi. Sefer Zikaron L'Moreinu Reb Menachem Kasher Bala Torah Shleima. So it's the 40 years ago, Reb Menachem Kasher was nifter. The family decided a few months ago, I guess maybe even more than that, to put out a volume dedicated to explain all about him. He was a fascinating individual, subjects, all different types of things. When you think about Menachem Kasher, from his main Chibur Torah Shlema, which is where he's famous from, he's a Ger Chassid. His relationship with the Ger Rebbe, his relationship with different Gedolim, the Rogachover project that he was very involved with, and a bunch of different Svarim of his, and he was very, Lamashal Rabbi Yochanan Fisher Perlau was crazy, he had a Mashundik relationship with him, so they got different people to write articles about him, their relationships they had with him, a very interesting thing about it. They had a section of some of the history about him, also fascinating. And they also have certain people, some new materials of his that were never published. And I think they actually plan on working on at least another volume because he's just there's so much to discuss about him. So this just came out. Lamashal, a famous thing about the datelines, a huge topic that's nonstop being tumbled. Just this week, a different sefer came out on the datelines, and a few weeks ago, a different Tshuva sefer came out about Rav Yechiel Michel Tukashinsky's family put out a sefer and a massive arichas about datelines. So Menachem Kasher also is involved in datelines, so they also have to have arichas about the datelines. But Kitzer, many of the different topics that he was involved with, they have different people that wrote about it. I'll call it a very interesting sefer that just came out and should be arriving in America very soon.
Fascinating. Did he have a relationship with Rav Zevin?
He did, but I don't know how strong it was. They had a relationship. But just to understand, I'll say this, even though maybe some people might be upset at me, he does not. It's when you're talking about Zevin and the Menachem Kasher, it's apples and oranges. If someone wants me to be masber more, they could sponsor an episode. We could explain it. But Reb Zevin is in a league of his own compared to Menachem Kasher. It's not. It's a whole different thing. He's manning a project, so to speak. But anyway, I'm saying Dvarim very bekitzer, but it's a big arichos. Hashem. One day
you could do probably a bunch of episodes on Rav Zevin. How many?
I don't even know.
He's probably one of you talk about your heroes from one generation.
Yeah,
He's certainly one of your.
Yes, I think basically from approximately 10th, 11th grade, I started getting into his farm, slowly buying each one of his. Yes, incredible. He had a tremendous impact on me. And he constantly does, because as I get older, I appreciate more and more a lot of different things that he did that at the time I read, I didn't appreciate. And as time goes on, you appreciate more. But he has actually nice reviews on the Menachem Kasher in his book reviews that I quote all the time. But anyway, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Beis.